There is nothing more humiliating than crying in a public place. Which is funny considering an element of my job description as an actress includes crying in front of a lot of people on purpose. For the record, I don't even enjoy it then. Nope, I prefer to cry where every other civilized grown-up does, in the bathroom. And I tried explaining this to my therapist when I let him in on my latest public display of emotional instability. You see, I was at dinner with two friends. I started the evening off with the best Negroni I have ever had. Now, if you don't know what a Negroni is, it's a cocktail, and it requires 3 ingredients: gin, Campari, and sweet vermouth, all in the same ratio. It is a delicious, boozy cocktail that traditionally tastes the same anywhere you go because of its simplicity. But not this Negroni. No, this one tasted different. As a Negroni connoisseur, I can tell you this was the best fucking Negroni I have ever had. This was well into our meal, and I was still incredibly wrapped up in my Negroni haze that I tracked down the bartender to join us tableside and explain to us why this Negroni was so good. I didn't have to pry very hard for a secret recipe. He just said, well, I make my own sweet vermouth. And he told us about how he was drying herbs and flowers from this backyard garden of the restaurant he worked at, how he fell in love with the unique nuances that the vermouth would take based off of the weather patterns of the previous year. Whether it was drier or more sweet, he liked paying attention to the personality of the plants and the dirt, how they would surprise him, how they would evolve. He paid attention. He noticed. He could name all of the things he loved about sweet vermouth at the drop of a hat. And after he walked away, the familiar feeling of my face getting hot compounded with my chest tightening, I was crying. For some reason, the way he not only saw the world, but really noticed it just fucking got to me. Like pulling the last inevitable Jenga piece holding the tower up, I couldn't help but topple face first into how I was really feeling in that moment, which was sad. I felt sad. I know why I felt sad, even if I'm not in a place to share it with you in this monologue. Now, look, to be clear, this crying was not disruptive to the restaurant. Nobody but the 2 people at my table noticed. What it was really disruptive to was the way I wanted to be seen by others. I like to think that I'm the Marie Kondo of compartmentalizing my feelings, but I'm not. The truth is, I have struggled to fully feel my feelings this year until they came crying out of me all over the dinner table, all because a bartender poetically described what he liked about sweet vermouth. So I asked my therapist, what's wrong with me? What is wrong with me? Well, what did you do wrong? He retorts. I cried in the middle of dinner and spilled my emotional guts all over 2 friends who did not sign up for that kind of dinner, all because of some romanticized herb garden. Duh. Trying to gauge my seriousness, my therapist says, yeah, you felt an emotion, you expressed it. What did you do wrong? Sounds like a pretty human thing to me. Well, I tell him how messy it felt. Yeah, I felt too messy, too loud, too emotional, too making it about me, too much me. So you felt like you were being too much of yourself? Therapists call this moment a breakthrough. Oprah calls it an aha moment. I call these moments, oh fuck, yep, I hear it. I even tried to justify my tears a few seconds ago by saying nobody else in the restaurant noticed. So what if they had? Sometimes people are sad and they cry. Sometimes people are loud. Sometimes they have a bad day. Sometimes they have a really good day and their level of excitement might annoy you. Yeah, I'm talking about me. I have been told that many times that my level of excitement is overwhelming for people. Well, so what? I don't want to dim myself down. And while we celebrate the ideas of self-love and self-care, maybe we can add self-grace and self-understanding to that. Instead of focusing on loving myself when I'm at my best, maybe it's time to try loving myself when I'm a mess. Well, comedian Blaire Postman loves to lead with mess. Her bio starts out stating she is a twice married, previously bankrupt woman who began her fourth career as a comedian at the age of 43 years old. She's known for her explosive, fast-paced delivery and comedy that often spans unusual topics. You can catch Blaire stand-up at clubs and alt rooms in New York City and around the country. And definitely, please go see her solo show, Lady ADHD, every month at the Caveat in New York. Or even on the road, she'll actually be at San Francisco's Sketchfest in January of 2023. Let's get messy with Blaire Postman. You know, I rarely have Diet Coke, like rarely. But when I do, I like enjoy it. Like at a movie theater, I'll get a Diet Coke, or like every once in a while after a really long day and I want it ice cold. So I do cold brew instead because it's healthier. But then I also am like still trying to quit cigarettes. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, oh,
I've done that. Yeah, I'm sorry. Just closing some stuff. This is my Diet Coke dream for you, Candace.
Okay.
The next time you have a Diet Coke, I want it to be a small glass bottle that's been in a refrigerator for several hours. Do not put it over ice, but so it needs to be cold from the refrigerator. And then open it and drink it immediately. That is amazing. That is the best of the best.
That sounds good. Where are these glass bottles?
Well, they're at very nice, like bougie restaurants in places like Brooklyn or elsewhere. You can occasionally, and they're like $9 each, which is ridiculous.
Of course.
Occasionally you will find them in a supermarket, like massively overpriced, but they also have the benefit of being adorable. So.
Well, that's true. That is true. I love that. I love the inflation of the things that like are not good for. We know it's not good for us. Like even when the last time I was in New York, I was like feeling good. I've made so many healthy decisions, and then of course it's like 11:30 at night, and I'm in stilettos, and I've had a martini. I'm just like, oh God, the cigarettes are calling, and I'm like the $20,
drunk cigarette,
$20,
drunk cigarette. I quit that a long time ago, but that's sort of that's the feeling I get with the small, long time refrigerated Diet Coke in a glass bottle.
Right.
It's the same idea.
All right.
It's sadder, but it's the same idea.
It's better than my cold brew addiction. Like it is at a certain point. Like when you have to apologize multiple times a day to be like, oh, it's the cold brew. I promise.
Oh, no, Candace, I do know because that is my whole life without any cold brew. That is, that is why I cannot have cold brew. I didn't know what it was, and I had a big old cup one day, and my boss is like, no, you don't get any more. That's ever, I don't mean today, I mean ever. You never get any more ever. But you on cold brew is me just walking around, just waking up in the morning being myself.
I love it. Lady ADHD. I have so many questions I want to ask you. I also just like love the write-up that I received just as like your blurb, your bio. And just like, I don't know when the last time you because your face is making me think when's the last time you read it. Hold on, are you nervous?
It's more that it's not that I haven't looked at it in a while. It's just that I tend to like play with it constantly. So I don't,
I love it. I love that you immediately lean in with like twice married, recently bankrupt, and began her fourth career.
Right.
Like,
I find it's best to just lay it all out there.
But I love that so much. Is that how you've always been? And I asked that having been in therapy yesterday, just trying to ask my therapist, like, but how can I be less of myself in the world? Because I just want people to like the likable versions of myself. And like, I'm embarrassed by the messy, loud versions. And he's like telling me, well, that's not how the world should work. You should be able to, like, what's wrong with being a little loud and messy and human? So I just was so delighted to read that kind of leaned in version.
Candace, you are an esteemed, famous actress. You've been in all kinds of things. You've had these colossal hit podcasts. But today is your lucky day because I'm here to tell you how to be loud and the messy version of yourself in the world. And just stop caring. I was always some version of this. I was always some version of I am talking when other people are trying to talk, and I am much louder than other people, and I gesticulate a lot, and all of that, um, all of that kind of thing. I'm not a wallflower, and sometimes I've tried to be, but it doesn't work out. And I'm very excitable, both to the negative side and the positive side. And but when I was younger, so when I was like, past grammar school, I'd say starting in junior high through college or law school, I and probably through my first wedding. Let's say through my first wedding, I was really trying to be perfect. And let me explain, because people apparently in my life, some people, including my first husband, seem to think that I had the capacity to be perfect and to never make mistakes. And so, were they narcissists, or were they just people who really believed in my potential? But I really was. I hated making mistakes. I hated interrupting people. I hated. I didn't know this back then. I didn't get diagnosed in my 30s and didn't pay attention to my ADHD until like my 40s. But I didn't realize where it came from, but I just always felt like I was forgetting something, or and I really didn't want to be. And I spent a lot of energy trying to be, uh, quieter, thinner, all the things we're supposed to be. Insert your thing here. And whatever that meant, to be perfect, to not forget anything, to be super organized, and yet to do everything in the world, and yet be able to never like forget anything, and to be able to do it all on my
Mhm.
own. And it is exhausting. It's exhausting, and it also doesn't work. Like, it's like it, and I sort of discovered that being who I am is so much more interesting than being what other people wanted to be, and it's certainly more fun for me. It's certainly also some of the people too who I thought were the most would from out right, this is the Instagram mistake that we all make, right? The outward appearance is the real life. And so
Mhm.
I would get, I would feel like there were people in the world, high school, college, work life, whatever it might be, who were judgmental of me. And the more I was myself, the more I raised my hand and said, I don't know what that acronym means in the meeting. Or like, I'm pretty smart. I don't know what it means. Somebody else probably doesn't know either. Or whatever it might be, or laying out like the messiness of your personal life, not TMI, not like, hey, I just met you and here's my life story, like having appropriate boundaries, but
Mhm.
these little messy things. And just kind of saying, yeah, that's me. That's what I think. That's what I'm missing. Um, the people I thought a lot of the time who would be the most judgmental were the most embracing of it. Like, oh my God, because they're sitting here white knuckling it through their lives. That's why
Yeah.
I thought they seemed really judgmental. They are really judgmental about themselves. And so they're probably
Yeah.
looking at me and having mixed feelings along the lines of, on the one hand, if that was me, I would be terrified for sort of being that open or blunt or what have you. On the other hand, that seems very free, and I wish I could do that too. So, doesn't always work out, but I think it works out better than the other way.
I think it does. I think that I hope that it does. I mean, and going back to the idea, because I think that that is something so universally relatable, is that we're all trying to be all the things and do them all very, very well, especially, not to just like to gender it, but
No, women. Which women have been told that they're women, or people identifying as women, or whatever.
yes.
Always, yes.
So in what ways did you start to realize, oh, this isn't working? Like, was it something internalized, or were you just seeing it in or kind of mirrored to you in the way that your life was going?
Right. Well, there were steps along the way. Like when my first husband, who I was only married to very briefly, great ceremony though, beautiful reception, great honeymoon. But the when I always felt like I was walking on eggshells, but maybe that was just me because I'm difficult, and maybe this person's going to help me get my life together or whatever. And when that person revealed to me at one point that he was annoyed that a family member of mine had given him a birthday gift because he didn't want any birthday gifts, and so he wasn't going to talk to that family member. And I find myself jumping through all these hoops, like begging him not to act this way, and realizing, like, wait a second, this is not going to get better. This is only going to get worse. It's only been 4, 5, 6 months so far. It's only going to get worse. I need to get out of this because I am suffocating, and I can some outer body experience sort of part of me could look down at me and see what was happening, and like, I've watched enough Oprah. I know that this is a bad situation that's not going to get better, and I can't fix it. And he's always been like this. He's just been turning up the heat as the months and years have gone by until we get to this point. I think my husband, I just say this for people who are in recovery. I just want them to know before I say this that I have been given permission to talk about these things. So, my current husband, P.S. doesn't love it when I call him my current husband. My husband, my husband, who is the second person I married. My husband now, who we've been married for 15 years, when he's a recovering alcoholic, has been for just about 10 years. And when he went into recovery, like all good people who are really trying to be perfect, even though they're not perfect and they know it, was really good at giving advice and trying to control everything, or trying to control everything. And so I went into a group called Al-Anon that is for family members, friends, any adjacent, we'll call it, people for alcoholics, drug addiction, what have you. And you kind of go in thinking it's like learning how to commiserate and deal with your recovering person, or maybe not in recovery, addict, alcoholic, but it's not. It's to help you because you're crazy. Those are my words. A lot of people in Al-Anon wouldn't like me saying those words or talking about those words, but
but it's reprogramming, like the way of trying to, maybe thinking that you're fixing someone or helping
and you're
someone.
so obsessed with everything else going on around you that you're kind of missing your own shit. I don't know if we can say shit on this podcast. I just said it twice now.
You fucking can.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's the whole show now. It's all like George Carlin's 7 words you can't say on television. No, but it's so you're not looking at your own shit. You've made yourself crazy. You've made yourself, or not made yourself, but you're codependent. You're not focusing on the stuff that you're ignoring about your own life. That you have plenty to focus on about yourself. That doesn't, and you know what? It's not gonna hurt the alcoholic if the alcoholic or drug addict is gonna drink or drug or hoard or whatever it is that they're addicted, their drug of choice is. It's not because you did or didn't like load or unload the dishwasher, or didn't remind them again to get their car fixed, or whatever it is. It's if you take care of yourself, the rest of the world is actually going to be a lot easier for you, whether or not the person you're with is in a solid recovery or not. And so that, I mean, I had felt like I had been clenching my fists and grinding my teeth, and metaphorically, but also maybe in real life, since I was, 11 years old until I was 40. And it was different times obvious to me that I was not doing a lot of the things I wanted to do because I was afraid, even though outwardly, well, before I was 40, my whole life, I seemed like the kind of person who wasn't afraid. I seemed like in air quotes, brave person. And that was just because I would tell somebody to shut up who was being a jerk, or I would, get up in front of people, not from a comedian performance standpoint, but say get up in front of class and give a report, or do something at work that other people might have a fear or a phobia about. But I was everything I did was based on fear. It was based on, not thinking that the things that I wanted were okay to want in life. some of that came internally, but a lot of that was taught to me from a very young age, and denying the kind of life and profession and so forth that I wanted to have. And I denied that self to myself for a long time. So I was a very scared person who didn't seem very scared.
Now, just in finding the root of where that came from,
Mhm.
and in just saying that you were taught that, I was actually having so much of this conversation just or just on and off with my
Well,
therapist
I'll
that I've
charge
been
you
seeing
half of
throughout this
whatever
year.
they're charging you.
Perfect. Perfect. And you'll throw in some Diet Cokes as
Hmm.
well?
Only the best.
Obviously.
Only the best.
Obviously. But I think it is so interesting when you start at a later point in life to look back at, because all of a sudden I feel like all these like triggers from your youth start really rearing their heads in their 30s. For some reason they just seem like not as you're not aware of them in your 20s, or I don't know if they're not popping up as
I
much as
think me personally, I was just going out and drinking more. Maybe I don't.
that too. Same. Me. Yeah, yep. That could also
There's
I just was
lots of ways to
distracted.
numb it, like, or you're dating, or
Yep.
you're doing early
Yes.
career stuff where you're trying to get ahead, or you're traveling, on a bus around Europe for a nickel, or whatever your way of numbing it, right, in our 20s, right?
Yes. But it being this point in your life where you've obviously had reflection on, maybe asking yourself, like, hey, where did some of this come from? Do you see some of it being taught to you by whether it's just the way that you were raised, or do you feel like now looking back, was there a version of this taught to you because you didn't realize that maybe, your neurodivergence of like learning different all of a sudden got kind of like thrown at you in a way that kind of um, changed your way of seeing yourself in the world?
I would say that, yes, I was taught that where I was raised very much.
Okay.
I was a very, outgoing, precocious child, and, I read very young. I started reading very young when I was, like, 2 years old, but I love to make up songs. I used to play on the piano in kindergarten, and I used to sing. I got this lead role in this musical when I was in second grade. That's what I wanted to do when I was 6, 7 years old and on. After that, I would start listening to comedy way younger. Like I'm listening to George Carlin and Richard Pryor records, like vinyl records, and not in a hip way. Like that's all we had. Records, when I was way too young, like 9, 10. 10, 11 years old, and memorizing all of it and loving all of
Oh,
that.
perfect.
And
Yeah.
but the vision that my parents and people around me had was not that life. Like it was considered to be not evil. Like it's not like we went to a church where dancing was a sin, or something like that. But it was just it's a waste. You can't succeed at that. You will fail if you try to do that sort of thing. It is a waste of whatever intelligence you have. It's a waste of that intelligence. It's just ridiculous. Stop it. Don't think about that. And so anything even along those lines just wasn't really rewarded in any way. I think what the ADHD issues only amplified that, in that it was just I would I was always circling around being a performer of one kind or another, but never really doing it, and always having these ideas to get me close without actually pulling the trigger on becoming a performer or someone in the arts. And I think the ADHD just made it maybe more likely that I was always finding a way to be a performer in whatever I did. So I went to law school. You know, People said, "Why don't you become a trial lawyer?" And I'm like, "Well, that was appealing. However, it turns out it's actually a lot of reading very small footnotes. It's actually not that fun." Or even in the jobs I've had more recently, where I've given presentations or been in some kind of sales ish capacity, that I can bring that to it. But the ADHD made it more irrepressible for me. I think if I don't know if this is true, like perfectly true, but I have one small theory that if I wasn't ADHD, it would have been easier for me to sublimate and shove everything down to the bottom that I wanted, to, at a certain point in my life, wanted to shove down and ignore about myself and what I wanted. And I would have just never done it. Now, is that true? Is that like provably true? I no, probably not. But I do know that the ADHD makes, it really, because I'm more impulsive, but it also controls things like emotions. It's a certain brain chemistry in that means that that chemistry regulates things like focus, but also things like attention and impulsivity and emotions. So it's very hard when those things well up to repress them. And so I it was very hard. It got so hard to ignore all those things that I really wanted to do. And then, just to bring it back a bit, when the shit went down, that's what we call the time in my life where like he got in so much trouble, it was undeniable. Everybody was fighting with everyone in her family, like just
with your current husband.
Current husband. When all that happened 10-ish or so years ago,
the height of his addiction.
Yeah, like when he was really hitting rock bottom, that it caused so much disdain and anger from people in my life that I was in my family and just sort of the world that I was always trying to please. They were already so angry, annoyed, telling me all the ways I had screwed up, how he had screwed up, all the things we had done wrong, that I now had nothing to lose. And that's when I started performing. So when I say part of it is that I went to Al-Anon, that's true. But you know how often you'll hear people say things along the lines of, that thing that you thought was slamming a door in your face was actually opening a window. The thing that you think was going to be the worst thing actually turns out it was doing you a huge favor. And his rock bottom and everything that I was going through surrounding that felt horrible at the time. I didn't want to go through any of that. And so many people were angry, disappointed, telling me why I was bad, why he was bad, why we were bad together, all the things about everybody who was bad and angry at me. It was very freeing because that was the thing that kept me from really trying to be a performer for real in my life. And it was suddenly not an issue because they were already really pissed off. So
like, I don't have to be good anymore.
I don't have to
be,
you know what? Thank you for giving me, I am still, 40, 41, 42, holding on to this thing of someone who's still trying to be a good girl. And it turns out I can't be. I have all the things that I was always worried about being thought of me, etc. is now very obvious that many, many people think that of me. So now I don't have to pretend anymore that I'm a good girl. I can just go do the thing I want to do.
I love that so much. And it is so, it drives, I'm the same way where I have to remind myself, I am an adult. I am a grown woman. Why am I still
allowed
worried?
to have opinions that don't have to be
allowed
based
to have opinions.
On things.
Yes, and just the thought of like I'm allowed to be a little bit loud. I'm allowed to think that, I'm allowed to say something that comes out completely wrong and be like, well, you know what? I just was having a tough day and I didn't sleep.
Or even was it wrong?
And that's what you got that day. Or that wasn't wrong.
It just was your way of putting it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. All of those things. Well, I know that, just hearing you talk about your husband's addiction and what that, I know that puts such, the fact that you guys are in your marriage right now is such a beautiful thing that doesn't always happen.
No, not at all. And I'm not, let's just say it could have gone another way. Many times.
Of course, I'm sure there is someone listening right now who feels all of those sentiments.
Yeah.
I think it was such an interesting thing seeing there was like a, even regardless of where you stand politically, but just the fact that there was leaked audio of Joe Biden trying to contact his son.
Oh, yeah.
While he was in the throes of his addiction.
Oh, God.
And again, regardless where you stand politically, but I think it's so necessary because it's not necessary that that's out in the world. It just pulls at your heartstrings because everyone knows someone who has struggled with addiction.
If we could all just pretend stop pretending that isn't the case, I think it would clear up a lot of anger and aggression out there in the world.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of people, honestly, and it's not, you'll hear stories in the rooms about people who the addict or alcoholic parent, let's say, and we don't have kids, but parent would be like the favorite parent. because like the people who are on the other side, like me, the Al-Anon or codependent person, is just the day-to-day bigger jerk, like around the house.
Yeah.
And it's just if we could just, and so much of it goes towards an energy of either covering up what we think is bad about the other person is doing, or about ourselves, or about our lives, or how really everything is really our fault, and we project this anger because really we're mad at ourselves. Like, if we could just let go of the idea that, I'm going to go on a limb and say most people know somebody within 1 to 2 degrees of separation who has some kind of serious addiction problem. And that might be drugs and alcohol. It might be food. It might be hoarding. It might be, there are others, who have something like that. I think people would be a little less going around the world with less of a chip on their shoulder and less angry. They'd be unburdening themselves to a point that would actually be a big benefit to everyone around us.
Well, and we would release the shame
Yes.
and stigma from just getting help, and also leaning into the resources that already exist. There are incredible resources. There are incredible communities. And if only it could open up more for people to not feel like this shame and stigma that they have to, which also leads into, I think, the shame and stigma that can revolve around mental health and just, or even any sort of diagnosis that you get. And I feel like this is coming up more and more, especially for women in their like 30s and 40s, getting diagnosed with things that all of a sudden turn on this light bulb and go like, wow, this makes so much sense
God,
to
that's
me.
me.
Because I'm also like, what's crazy is, all I grew up with an understanding of ADHD was it's what kids had in elementary school, and then but you don't want to like actually tell anyone that they have it, because then they're just going to get put on Ritalin or something. Right. And then everyone says they have ADHD so that they can get
Adderall.
Thank you, Adderall, so that they can like go out and party,
right,
or like stay up and study, and that's it. Like, I feel like that was the conversation of what it means to be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder.
Are you millennial? You're millennial-ish?
I think I'm considered a millennial. Yeah,
I mean, that's all right. I understand there's a whole stigma that some people don't declare they're millennial. So I am Gen X. There's a purpose to this besides just having fun with millennials. And that is just that of course, somewhere there were people being diagnosed with ADHD. But when I was in grammar school in the 70s and junior high and high school in the 80s, there was not ADHD. It was not a thing. It was not everywhere. I from what I understand, first of all, I premise by saying I'm not a psychiatrist. I read things, but mostly headlines, And so like, this is my understanding, but my understanding is, when it was being diagnosed, it was largely males who were being very actively hyperactive, and even to the point of being sort of violent, like punching a wall or throwing chairs around the classroom. And then, yes, you were expected largely to grow out of it. And for me, it's interesting because when I finally, I had a lot of shame, the fear, the shame, it all goes together in a lovely sandwich of things we do to ourselves. But, that fear, a lot of it came around being afraid of disappointing people. And a lot of that came around of the times throughout my life where I was told, like, how did you not remember that assignment or that project that you were supposed to do? And yet you did all this other stuff great, but you totally blew it because you didn't, hand in your assignment on time. Or you had so much potential, but you never quite reached your potential. Or being told that you are lazy. Like, we know you're smart because we saw this happening when you were in kindergarten or when you were in open classrooms in grammar school. But now you're not paying as much attention to your physics class as your AP history class. And so you're kind of lazy. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not tons. And that cumulative effect over years and decades is a lot of shame, a lot of self-blame, a lot of low self-esteem. And so when I was maybe 30 or 31, I was at work listening to like an NPR station, and they had somebody on describing ADHD. So this is early 90s now. And I'm like, oh my God, that's me. And I went and I got a diagnosis, but they were still really, they weren't diagnosing as many women. They still don't.
Mhm.
Girls and women and people presenting as such. They do not, they did not give me anything like Ritalin uh, or Adderall. They gave me something that is, oh my gosh, I forget the name of it, but it's used also for like, it's a quit smoking drug and other things. And it really didn't because they didn't want to just give those pills out, because even a lot of the doctors had this stigma that like it was going to be used and abused, whereas what's really been found and what the research has shown now is that it just makes us normal. If you don't have ADHD and you take this pill, yeah, it might be nothing but a party pill. For me, it just means like I might remember my keys, which is not a party. I mean, I don't care how old I am, that's still not a party. And and so it just makes me so frustrated. So because for all these years I was given prescriptions that really didn't work when there were others out there, because someone made the judgment that I didn't really need it. And to me, implicitly in there is also maybe the judgment that, you know, women don't really have it, or it's not really that bad, or really you can control it. And being told that you can control something that you can't control is maddening. It's as if you had some kind of thyroid disorder that made you gain 200 pounds and you were told to control your thyroid with your brain. And it just doesn't,
Mhm.
no, you don't have the chemistry. Your thyroid is not making the chemicals you need in order to control it regularly. And the same as in my brain, my body is not making the chemicals I need to do those things that you think are so easy. And I'm glad they're easy for you, but they're not easy for me. But guess what? Some fucking things are easy for me that are really hard for you and that you will never be able to do. So I really, because of the shame around it, and because so many people in my life just told me it wasn't real, that you should be worried about getting addicted, when the research now shows that people who don't get treated for the ADHD are much more likely to be addicted to substances, not Adderall, heroin,
Mhm.
alcohol, cocaine, self-medicate in other ways. Being told all that stuff that I didn't even really take it seriously until after my husband's, around the time of my husband's rock bottom. And I started taking my own self seriously. And so, his rock bottom got him off substances. And I guess you could say it got me on substances. And I started being like, well, this just really delving more into research and trying to seek out really knowledgeable people instead of letting the voices around me. And I'm not just talking about like family, or I'm talking about just people who really feel
Society. Yeah.
like they can tell you that ADHD isn't real, who met you 1 minute ago. And
Mhm.
the it's not the only thing, but to me, and medication doesn't work the same way in all people. I am not saying I am pro medication for people for whom it works. I am not trying to make any kind of blanket statement of what everyone should do or be on or take or not take. But
And dosages matter as well. Like
dosages
anyone who's
matter. Everybody's
it takes
your
time, it's a
metabolism is different. It's
process.
everything is different. And
Yes.
so it's just makes me so crazy about all the years I wasted not taking care of this thing. But at least I got diagnosed, and at least I did get it taken care of. There's still people out there today, women in particular, and I think it's really just it's, you might say, it has super bloomed during COVID and during quarantine, when people just had more time with themselves and without inside
Yeah.
input, and they did more research and came to know about ADHD, and maybe that they were ADHD and diagnosed. But a lot of women in particular, and women of color especially, men of color too, but women of color getting a diagnosis is very difficult. Getting the right medication, as is often the case with medications that have nothing to do with ADHD, or medical help that has nothing to do with ADHD, especially difficult for women of color. And I mean, I don't know if the world is just afraid that if we like actually treat these women, that, we're going to also want other things, like, you're not going to be able to. I don't think it's such a conspiracy that literally they're not treating women because then they're going to be equipped to take over the world. But, I'm not saying it's not true either.
I have a feeling that the work that you've done, especially just with your comedy and using your social media platforms to not only make people laugh, but also share in your experiences as a female with ADHD. I want to also kind of lead everyone into how you got into your career of comedy because you also mentioned law. So there was so there was a point you were in law school or you became a lawyer.
I was a lawyer. I was a lawyer for a hot minute. I was a lawyer for maybe 2 years.
And then what was your career after that?
My career after that. So I didn't really want to go to law school, but my whole life, everyone's like, you have to go to law school. You have a big mouth. Turns out that's not what law school is. And my first...
There's a little more to it.
Turns out there's more to it, but I didn't, there was no Google, in fairness to me. It wasn't like I could just Google it, but like I did I'm like, I get it when I get there. Everyone else did research about what law school is and requires, not me. So I went and I did terrible my first year. And then it seemed to me everyone in my class then decided to kind of be sort of open about how maybe they thought I was stupid. That sort of pettiness, like you sort of treating me as if I am less than you. Now I'm going to kick your ass. Now I'm going to do well.
Game on.
And nothing is more motivating. There's a lot of things that make the dopamine and other chemicals that an ADHD brain needs to really hyper focus. And that could be interest. It could be urgency, but it also can be pettiness. And I'm petty as fuck. And so if I want to be, and so I wound up doing okay, and I graduated and took and passed a few bar exams. And then I decided I was going to do entertainment law, media law, see how I'm circling. These little concentric circles. And I did that. And I worked for a First Amendment group for 1 year and then went to a federal government organization. And that was awful. And so very, very boring. And then I decided I would have more fun as an agent, talent agent, manager. And I applied to start in the mailroom of what was then the William Morris agency. I think it's now William Morris Endeavor. And I did the whole mailroom to assistant thing. And then I came back. I was in New York. I came back to DC and I was a speaker agent, a speaker agency. I did do some improv comedy during that time, but it was very like just for fun kind of stuff. Like it was never, and then I would quit every time I was repping someone because I'm like, it wouldn't be ethical for me to be an agent for speakers and to do improv comedy on the side because that's performing. No one cares that you're doing improv comedy, but whatever. So I would start and stop with that a lot. And then I decided it was too boring at the speakers agency and to no one's distress at the time at that particular organization, I left, started my own thing, went in-house at Second City where I sold speeches and trainings there. And then
which Second City is a comedy.
Chicago, yeah. Sketch and improv. So all those folks from Saturday Night Live.
So it's like, exactly. You were
circling around it.
Now
I'm selling it now.
Entire time.
Came back to be a manager, had a comedy festival that, of course, I wasn't in because I wasn't a comedian. And I met all these people. And then came back to New York, was a comedy manager, had some great clients who are very famous now, some of them, but not because of me. And good for them. And they would have been with or without me at the beginning. And had this comedy festival and it just couldn't fail. I poured all of this money into it in its final year when we were going into a past economic downturn in 2008. And, the advertisers and the sponsors didn't show up like they had in years past. And I don't know, some part of me just decided that, well, if I just keep going and keep pretending like everything's fine, it'll all work out. And of course it didn't. And I went bankrupt. I don't mean like I had no more money left. I mean, paperwork was filed, legal decisions were made. And this is before my husband got sober. We moved. I picked a whole new career. I decided to learn how to be a media advertising sponsorship salesperson, which I, have done for 10 or so years. We moved to another part of the East Coast for that first job, which is wound up where my husband got sober and all this other eventually really good stuff happened, but first some bad stuff happened. But it wasn't like I had a choice of like anything I wanted to do. I was looking for something that I might be able to do that might be able to make me money and help me rebuild some small semblance of a life and maybe a nest egg. Like maybe I could retire before I'm 80 or 90.
Well, and the optics, it sounds like, of the life that you were like meant to somewhat pseudo lead. It still wasn't like the entertainment
Oh,
life,
no, not
but
at all. Yeah,
yes.
and, when I took that job in, like I said, another part of the East Coast, it wasn't we were there a year or a year and a half, maybe a little bit more before my husband really hit rock bottom. It's
So then at what point what was the day that you finally said, "I'm gonna go do stand up tonight"? Was it an open mic night? Where did you write your bits beforehand, or was this like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and you
Oh,
just went up
let's not get
there, but you
started
kept
on
your
that
top
show
on?
because, look, that show first of all, I preface it by saying I love that show. I love that show. I love everyone on that show. The only thing I don't like or is the start of her is these massive leaps in her career that she is able to make.
Of course.
And her
of course, of course.
not ever writing anything ever. And somehow everyone thinks it's brilliant. Also, her outfits. They're great. I love looking at them. But she, the actress, is great. Today, I think her manager would be the one who's the comic. Anyway, it was my husband had just, let's see, he had been sober maybe 4, 5, 6 months. And I had taken an improv class. I didn't really need an improv class, but I needed somewhere to do something. So I took this class. And
It's like a gym for working.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of like
Right.
yes, like yes.
And there was a club there that had just closed and hadn't later reopened called Dead Crow Comedy in Wilmington, North Carolina. And while they were still looking for their next venue, there was this open mic at the Real Cafe. And I went and watched a few times. And the guy I took the class from also did stand up, and he was there, and he said, "Well, are you going to do stand up tonight?" And I'm like, wasn't counting on it. He's like, "Well, the first slot, it's literally like a sign up sheet, and there's like 40 people on it, but no one wants to go first. They're not as old as me." And I'm like, he's like, "Well, slots number 1 is open." And I'm like, "Okay, fine, I'll go first." Because if I'm going to do something, I'm a tear the Band-Aid off kind of person. And so it only took 20 years and then 10 seconds. And I kind of made something up based on some kind of improv scene I had done. And it was like 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, my God, I can't even say my name in 3 or 4 minutes on this podcast. So, I mean, it's not hard for me to fill the time. And it was just, I think some of it was funny and some of it was more extemporaneous. And I think it was just very clear that I wasn't uncomfortable on stage and you could hear me and I didn't run off stage in fear. Even though the material wasn't really material, it was clear I was having fun being up there. Yeah. And just kind of took off from there.
At what point as you started to form your comedy career and your comedy act, did you start, when was Lady ADHD born?
Well, interestingly, Lady ADHD was born in quarantine because I was asked by a couple people or suggested to me that I should do a one-person show. Because I have a lot of material and stand-up material. And in particular, I have some odd bits, and some of them involve using flip charts. If we haven't lost you yet, audience, please hang in. I know I said flip charts coming. I promise it's okay. And I started putting, and those just came about because that's how my mind worked. I would see these hidden patterns, and I know now, but hidden patterns and connections and details, and it was a fun way to lay it out. So as I was putting the show together, it became, I did a run through with some people, and it was perfectly fine feedback, but I was getting frustrated trying to express myself about these flip charts and why I use them and how it lays everything out. And I would say I just get so frustrated with people not understanding that I'm using these flip charts so people can see the inside of my mind, because it's going to make it funnier for them. It's going to help me guide them through this funny thing, even though we don't know each other. We don't have any context. In comedy, the hard part, funny people might not be funny on stage or in stand-up because you have to create very quickly a context and where the joke makes sense, right? It's not like we're having a conversation for an hour and then I put a joke in, and of course it makes sense. We've been talking about this thing for an hour. So I use a flip chart in part to make context, but also because it's funny, and sometimes pictures are funny. And I suddenly came to realize that all these flip chart bits that I had created over the years were because of my ADHD. That's where they sort of came from. That's why the reason that I had all this odd material about hidden patterns and connections about the history of Super Bowl halftime shows, or Shel Silverstein and the Giving Tree, or Schoolhouse Rock, or whatever it might be, is because of my ADHD brain. And I wound up kind of putting sort of TED Talk segues and breakdowns as the connective tissue between these flip chart comedy bits, explaining sort of where they came from, how my mind works, and why this more serious reasons about why these kind of connections happen, but also the frustrating things that people don't see when I'm just doing a comedy show. So the things that are difficult, putting together a bit it seems like it's just a fun rabbit hole about cats, but also explaining that, that ability to go down that rabbit hole and hyper focus has a reputation for being just about silly, fun things like cats. But also people with ADHD hyper focus on things like negative feelings about ourselves. And that releases dopamine too, because it's very interesting to us. And so we can spiral into, go into a shame spiral about that. Or we can open up a calendar just to check out like what open weekends I have over the next 3 months to do road shows. And suddenly, because of the way our ADHD brains interpret time, which is just now and not right now, those are kind of the only two options, it can suddenly feel like all of the things on your calendar are due right now, right then. Everything's happening. You have to do everything now. Everything must be finished right now today. And it just fills me with anxiety. So I wanted to show, as a person who has also in my life been seen as brave when I knew I was not brave, I wanted to show all the great things and the cool stuff that comes from an ADHD brain and the ability to hyper focus and to see hidden patterns, connections, details, and so forth. But I wanted to make sure people understood the other side, which is sometimes it makes me very anxious. Sometimes I have a bit of an anger problem or excitability problem. Sometimes, and I have to learn how to manage all that. And I didn't want to get on stage and just make it seem like, look, ADHD's made me really quick and witty. And maybe it has. But I also wanted to show that other side of it too, where the bad that comes with the good, or the difficult that comes with the fun.
The difficult that comes with the fun. I wrote down one of the things that you say. I don't know if you say this in every single show, but just that one of the big life lessons that you've realized at this point is we don't know.
Yes.
We don't know where the next big idea is coming from. And just even going back to, I don't remember if we were recording or not, but just talking about kind of stepping into new creative ventures. And, you had congratulated me on the podcast, and I was saying I feel incredibly nauseous because it's so scary for people to I'd rather just make it and then nobody see it, but it's just the joy of making it.
Right.
And it's the part where everybody has to look at me now. But that's the thing, is it takes time, and it's an evolution. It's getting on the stage the first time and saying, you know what, there's something here. I don't know what it is. And it's okay. Let's dive in and go deeper, because you got to start somewhere and you don't know where the next idea comes from. And you have to also, it can't be just the final product. You have to recognize the messy bits that got you there. It can't just be, the successes. It's the failure that comes with that. And it can't just be the culture it's the subcultures that exist within, that can be easily written off as it doesn't matter. But all of those things are just as important, and as well as within ourselves.
You see, this is why you have this podcast. Exactly. And so that whole thing about we don't know, a lot of what I show in Lady ADHD is that, look, there's all these hidden patterns and connections. I don't see all of them at all, but people are capable of seeing things that you don't see. And the idea of embracing the messy bits is, first of all, a lot of times that's the fun part. But, it's okay to just have fun too with nothing great coming out of everything all the goddamn time. But, knowing that, I always say to people when we're in some kind of, a creative, spitballing situation, or we're coming up with, I'm like, look, I'm going to have 1,000 ideas. Like some people would call that 1,000. I'm going to have 1,000 ideas, and they're not all keepers. Like, but I don't stop myself anymore from spitting them out, because what it's going to really do is keep the good, weird one from coming out. We got to get the bad stuff or the silly stuff out of the way, so we can come up with the gem, and you're not going to know what the gem is right away necessarily. And just knowing that all of these fun ideas, all of these things, all these when I follow stories in this show of people or franchises like Schoolhouse Rock, or the first guy who ever produced a Super Bowl halftime show, you don't know from the beginning. You don't have to. So much of the time I would get frustrated because I would want to try something, not necessarily in comedy, I mean, earlier in life. And people are like, I don't think that's going to work out. Or I don't think that's going to, here's a reason I think that's a bad idea. And it's like, who cares? So then it fails. Then fine. I mean, then who cares? Let's have a good time at this thing that's going to fail. But when you hinder everything before it gets going, and this is a very big notion in improv, when you hinder every idea before it can even get out of anyone's brain or out of their mouth or created from their hands, you're killing everything great before it's even gotten a chance to be born for us to see if it's great. You've never given anything a chance. If something's not perfect, I mean, I got this message so much growing up. If it's not perfect the first time you try it or the first shot you take at it, quit. It's not good.
It's not your thing.
It's not your thing.
It's not your
thing. What a terrible freaking lesson that is for all of us, especially women, but everybody. I mean, that is, and it's just such bullshit. And even though I'm on Instagram, I would like everyone to follow me on TikTok and Instagram, Postman Comedy, blah, blah, blah. It's like, don't think that the person you see with 10 million followers is that happened the first day they ever did anything. It's just, let's give everybody a chance to quote unquote fail. You will be surprised at what great things come from that. And just to free people, it just makes me so frustrated all the times, all the wasted time in my life where I thought if I wasn't perfect at something from the first effort that I was going to have to quit or I needed to avoid it. And so I wasted so many years not doing the stuff I love, not doing the stuff I think I was meant to do because of that. And I don't want anyone to think that they have to know from the get-go of doing their weird little thing how it leads to something great, or that it even has to lead to anything great. So you want that cure for cancer, you want that great new work of artistry. Well, then you better let people go out and do their little silly stuff, and also not stop yourself from quote unquote failing. Every success, so many incarnations of that show before it even got to the stage. And I have rewritten it 1,000,000 times, I feel like, since the very first time I performed it on stage. So it's just, oh God, please don't tell yourself that you have to be perfect or you have to be great at something before you even take the tiniest baby step to doing it. That is holding us all back. You're not giving us,
or that there's a time stamp.
Yeah.
Yes, or that there's a time stamp.
I was 43 when I started stand-up. I am, as I say in the show, let me tell you how popular it made me to be a recently bankrupt, twice married, 43-year-old woman showing up to comedy open mics with a flip chart. The other comics wouldn't talk to me because it seemed like a weird mashup between a 1940s ventriloquist act and a friend of their mom's. And that would have stopped me when I was 30. But it didn't stop me when I was 40-ish, 42, 43. In fact, just looking at the date, my 9th anniversary of stand-up was 2 days ago, as it turns out.
That's amazing.
So
that's amazing. It makes me think of I don't know, Tom Robbins wrote my favorite book, and one of the final lines in it is, "It's never too late to have a happy childhood."
Right. I've heard that
I
line.
just fucking love that so
Yes, I am
much.
having my happy childhood. But it makes me a better adult.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Candace.
Okay, Blaire.
What do you want to do that you haven't let yourself really try?
Oh God, Isn't that the $1 million
It can be
question?
little. It doesn't have to be a big deal thing. Did you make that flower wall? That's nice.
I did. I made that.
You've got
I made that, so I've checked that off the list.
Interior design,
Oh gosh, no, that's actually my nightmare. But I don't know. I think I really I enjoy some version of writing. I don't know what that is. I don't know
Right.
what that means. I don't know what it'll become. I
Right.
know that but that's been my weird thing. Ever since I was 18 in LA, I've just signed up for like random writing courses.
Great.
At least every couple of years, I like sign myself up for a writing course, but I don't know what it means.
And it doesn't have to. You don't have to know.
And it doesn't have to, but it's also it's being aware enough if this is something it's like
starting to nag at you a little bit.
When it starts to nag at you a little bit, yes. Well, Blaire, now I'm just going to so it doesn't keep nagging at me, and then I get uncomfortable saying the things that the goals that I'm too scared to admit that maybe I want for myself. I'm going to deflect, and which is something I'm really good at. But I love a cool down at the end of every episode, and I like to ask my guests just 5 last little things, which I actually, funny enough, picked up from a writing workshop that I did.
There you go.
It's like 5 things, and it's based off of like the hand. It's like thumbs up, something you like, your pointer finger, something you know, middle finger, something you hate, ring finger, something you love, and your pinky is like something quirky.
Okay.
But I like to ask every guest these questions because that icebreaker is always kind of stuck with me. But Blaire, what is something that you like?
Just like?
It can be anything besides Diet Coke.
No. I mean, that's love. That's something beyond like. That's like ice cream is beyond
and we'll get to love.
What do I like? I love walking really long distances, especially if I have a great audiobook or podcast to listen to. Like with no, on a Saturday or Sunday with no deadline to be anywhere in front of me. I love walking like.
Oh, you're in New York?
No, I'm in Baltimore.
Oh, you're in Baltimore.
Yes.
So will you go? Is this like
I just
you
moved
go out
here 6 months ago from DC. Long story, but I live very near the Inner Harbor, like a few blocks. So I will walk all the way around the harbor and all the way back. And I love letting I'm both getting input from something interesting like the audiobook, but I'm also, it lets my brain kind of play as it listens. So I like that.
So while you're doing these walks, what is your feeling when someone's walking then the other way? Are you like in your own zone? Do you feel like you have to make eye contact with every single person?
I've been told that I have the opposite of resting bitch face. That like this probably comes from how we were socially programmed as a child, but like I seem to always be like smiley and my eyes are wide open. And so I get asked for like, what time is it? Can you take our picture by the water in front of the, in Fells Point a lot. I get that a lot.
Yep. Same. That's very funny. Okay. Something that you know.
I'm going to tell you something that I've never said out loud to someone other than my husband and 1 or 2 comedy friends.
Oh my goodness.
This is not
breaking news.
It's going to seem really, I've built it up. It's not that big. It's a big deal to me. It's terrifying for me to say. So I'm going to say it.
Okay.
So I put you on the spot.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
I wrote this show. I've never written a show. There's a lot of dramatic parts, TED Talky kind of parts that aren't comedy. It's great. I know this show is great. It may not go anywhere big deal, like what is special. I know I'll put it a different way. I know I did a great job. And that is really, I'm like, my hands are sweating right now. It's really scary to say that to other people because people can go and we'll watch it or watch pieces of it or see other things I've done and you know how the internet is and like tell me all the reasons why it's not great or whatever, with way too much intensity. And it's very embarrassing. It's embarrassing for me to say that. I know. I won't even say it's great. I'm going to say I did a great job.
No, you can say it's great. I
know, but I can't. It's now we've jinxed it.
No, that's how I'm like when you're like, well, what do you want? What are they? And I'm like, I can't. If I say it, then it's I'm always until the ink is dry.
I'm saying it out loud because it's scary, and I don't say it out loud. And even when people tell me after a show, and this sounds very self-serving, like because people will listen to this podcast and be like, well, I guess it's great. No, I'm saying it out loud because it's terrifying for me, even if someone says something nice to me after a show. The way you want to make the show and then hide. I love performing the show and the energy, and then I would like to go into the backstage and like not have to. It's not the feedback that's like how to improve it. It's the compliments are just for some reason very embarrassing, and it's very hard for me to handle.
Yep.
So I have big imposter syndrome or whatever it is. But what I know, the short answer is what I know is that I did a great job creating and improving this thing that I made. And wherever it goes,
is there an
doesn't
element
matter.
of, and also that you know that you made the show that you wanted to make?
In the end, yes.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure what I wanted it to be at the beginning.
But you had to start somewhere.
I made the show I wanted to make, and I did a good job.
And you know you did a good job.
I did a great job.
You did a fucking great job.
I did a fucking great job, Candace.
You see why I like this exercise?
Yes, yeah. This is great. This could be
okay,
podcast.
Now,
well, every one of my answers is 70 minutes long, so this could be the whole podcast.
No, I love it. Okay, now something you hate.
Oh, I hate being told no. I hate being told you can't. And I also love it because it's very motivating. But I hate let's just shut it down. Let's just smother it before it ever has a chance to breathe. No, you're not allowed. No. Nope.
Something that you love.
Something that I love.
And not family. We all love, family.
And cats.
And cats. We love cats.
And ice cream.
We love ice cream.
Something that I love. I love finding something new that teaches me about something I never knew existed. So like if there was oh gosh, I can't remember his name. I just had it. He did a walk in the woods, and he did he has all these books, and they're about like the entire history of the home. And it's like you learn and that's why they're called closets, or whatever it might be. That kind of thing. I love that. I love finding things that teach me about how this little germ. There's a book about salt, the history of salt. It's fascinating. It teaches you where the phrase red herring came from and a million billion other things. And learning about how this little thing is why all this other stuff, geopolitical stuff, natural history stuff, just how we live our lives stuff is the way it is. I love that.
Now I want to find this book about salt because I'm just like, I didn't even think about
I know it
all
doesn't
that.
sound great.
No.
I'm telling you, it's fascinating.
I'm right there.
It's like 1,000 pages long. I recommend getting the audiobook.
Perfect. Okay, and then one quirky little fact about you.
I feel like I should tell you something that's not especially quirky because I come off as like, I'm quirky is who I am. That I want to tell you a way in which I'm really boring. I love being in bed with my cats. If my husband's there, that's great too, but it's not required. I love sometimes it takes me to throw my back out for this to happen. But it's Saturday or Sunday, I'm with my cats and I am watching Family Guy just for 4 hours while I text with a friend on the phone. This is not quirky. I'm just saying as much as I love just watching all of something if it's binge watching something or just watching, the Family Guys I've seen 100 times and just by myself laughing at the parts that I think are funny, that not everyone, they're not the big joke in the show. That's what I like to do.
Well, I like hanging out with you on this podcast.
Candace, anytime.
Blaire, thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry I did all the talking.
Well, that's, this is my version of deflecting so that I don't have to. This is my whole roundabout.
I think the next podcast episode, Candace, you should start talking every day. You talk about something you did last week that you were a little bit afraid to do and how you did it. There you go.
And that's why I write it all in essay form so I can workshop it before I put it on the mic because of my own idiosyncrasies.
But this was so much fun. I so much appreciate you having me. I had a great time, and I hope something useful came out of it for somebody who needs something useful.
Absolutely.
Today.
Absolutely. Even for me, there were useful things. So truly, selfishly, I feel great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. A Super Bloom podcast is hosted by me, Candace King, produced by Melissa D. Montz and Diamond Imprint Productions, edited by Diane Kang, post-production sound by Coco Lawrence, and advertising partnership with Acast.